Hello, YouTube Pipers. It's Double O Pipe, aka Rick. Right now, I'm going to load up my new Peterson, and it's my St. Patrick's from 2023, sent to me by Kentucky Highland Piper, who also sent me some Faulkner's Delight. And I have to admit I cheated. I tried this yesterday and I liked it. But about not even halfway in the bowl, I started feeling the effects of the nicotine. And it got a little bit too much for me, so I stopped smoking it. But I really liked it. It had a good flavor, and what I'm going to do is one of those smaller bowl pipes that I have, I'll put that in there, because it was very good. I liked it a lot. But I smoked something not too long ago. I can't remember what it was, but the nicotine effects snuck up on me, and I felt like I did the first time I smoked a cigarette. Well, the first time my dad made me smoke a cigar, actually. I think I told that story about they were gone and I found a cigar and lit it up and puffed on it. Of course, I wasn't inhaling because I was way too young. I don't know that I was even in school at that particular time. And every time I thought I heard him drive up, my mother had a cedar chest and I would grind it out on the cedar chest. And after I'd check them, they hadn't come home, I would light it up again. That happened about I guess about three times. And my dad, when he found those marks on the cedar chest and he saw that cigar, he said, "Son, I'm going to have you smoke the rest of this." Taught me a lesson. Green, man. And that's the way I felt when I smoked. I can't remember what the tobacco was that I smoked, but it was whatever the nicotine. Either the nicotine content was high, or I was inhaling, not realizing I was inhaling a little more than I should have. But anyway, I had broken out in a cold sweat, and I just felt really bad. So I've just filled this up with velvet. I forgot to tell you that. I like this little pipe. I smoked it yesterday. That's what I smoked in it. I can't remember that name. Faulkner's Delight. And like I say, I enjoyed it very much. But that nicotine snuck up on me and I didn't want to go through that again. So I just put it aside, and when I emptied the bowl, there was quite a bit of tobacco left. So I didn't smoke very much. Put that thing. Okay, back to my velvet. I've gotten a lot of advice about that P-lip, and I have gone to a place online and filled out a form to see if they can provide me with another stem. And I'm just waiting for them to get back in touch with me to let me know. Because I like that particular pipe. I just don't want to go with that P-lip again. I tell you, that was a miserable week. The roof of my mouth still feels funny, but live and learn. Well, everybody else has been telling their veteran stories. I'm a day late, but I thought I'd tell one. I don't know if I've told this or not. I don't think so. Back in 69, was it? Yeah, 69. I got married in April. I was stationed in Panama City at that time, Panama City, Florida, at Tyndall Air Force Base. And I was a weapons controller. I sat in front of a scope and brought two planes together so that the one that I was leading could shoot the other one out of the sky. These were training exercises, so there was no real live fire. Unless they were firing at a drone over the Gulf of Mexico. Anyway, after I got married, 2 months later, got my orders to go to Iceland. Iceland. My buddy Jack, my best friend that passed away, it's 3 years ago now. Miss that guy. Miss him a lot. He's one of those friends you could not see for 2-3 months and then just pick up where you left off the last conversation. That's the kind of friend he was. And I miss that. Plus, he was a funny guy, and he could lift your spirits like that if you were down a little. At any rate, when I was in college, he was in the Navy, and he got stationed in Iceland. And when he told me that, I laughed and laughed. I said, "You're going to be some place across the seas. I'm going to be here drinking, having fun." I said, "You're going to miss the US of A." I would write him letters and tell him how good things were going here, and he'd write me back letters that I'd have to burn in case my parents ever saw it. Because his language, being in the Navy, he knew some language that even I blushed when I read them. I wish I had them now, but I didn't at the time. I felt like I better get rid of these. Oh, at any rate, he sent me through the mail a symbolic present. It was a stuffed puffin, which is, I don't know if that's the national bird of Iceland, but they're pretty prominent on the cliffs of Iceland, and that was one of the souvenirs you could get, is one of those birds stuffed. And he sent me one through the mail. I got the message. Had that for years. When my daughter moved to Oregon, she asked if she could take it with her, and I said, "Sure, go ahead." And she let me know not too long ago that it had deteriorated so much that she had to toss it out because it wasn't going to last. And so anyway, that was, like I said, it was symbolic, and it was the bird in the mail. Let me get back to me going to Iceland. Two years after getting married, brand new bride. First assignment overseas, Iceland. She was working for Ma Bell. That was back when the telephone company was that monopoly. And I had gotten on the plane and said, toodaloo. We had talked about her coming up there, and I said I would check into it whenever I got up there to see what it was like and everything, to see if it would be a place that she would enjoy. Or otherwise, I'd be gone for a year and she'd be in the States for a year after being married for 2 months. Well, on the plane ride, I just fell asleep. I was in uniform naturally because I was reporting to the base whenever I got there. And they landed in Keflavik, which was the base. It was a naval base, not an Air Force base, but all the services had a component there. I fell asleep, and the stewardess, as we called them back then, came over and tapped me and said, "We're about to land." And I kind of shook my head and said, "Are we here?" She said, "Yeah, we're about to land." I looked outside. It was a clear day. I said, "What's the temperature like?" She said, "Oh, it's nice for Iceland." I said, "Well, I'm from South Carolina. What does that mean to me?" She said, "You might want to put on your coat." So I said, "Okay." And she handed me my coat. After we landed, a very nice landing, just one bump, and eased up to the terminal. Not knowing anything about the base, off to the left, I think it was, is where I would be working for the next, turned out to be 2 years. Well, while everybody was getting in the aisle to get off, I put my jacket on and buttoned up the first couple of buttons. It was a black London fog. I had my cap on. I was trying to think which one it was. There's one that we had that was a cloth cap that sat on your head that we had a unpolitic name for it these days. But I think I had on my large head cover, not the cloth one. So anyway, as I got to the door, I looked out and the breeze came up and it was cold. It was cold. I mean, it was June, but that weather was cold for me. And I got to the steps and stepped out on the, I guess the platform at the beginning of the steps, and looked around. There were a few people out there, and I caught somebody down there that looked familiar. And I looked at him, and I noticed that he was looking at me, and we both kind of tilted our heads like maybe we had met somewhere before. So I was walking down, and I was looking at him. He had on his cap. He had on a black London fog. And when I got to the bottom of the steps, he had walked over to where I was, looking straight at me. And he kind of looked at me funny, and he said, "My name's Marshall. I'm here to welcome you to Keflavik." And I looked at him, and we were about eye to eye. Just something really familiar about the guy. And as he was shaking my hand, one of the other officers over there came over and said, "Marshall, you got a twin brother?" I said, and I looked at him, and he had a mustache like mine. And I said, "That's what it is. We look like we could be twins." And he smiled and he said, "Yeah, you're right. That's where it is." He said, "I kept thinking you looked familiar too." And I looked at the guy who had said that, and I said, "My name's Rick. I don't have a brother, but I see what you're saying." So he asked me if that was all I had, is that bag that was in my hand. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, let's go over here and I'll take you around the base and point out things that you'll need to know." He said, "And that place over there is called the OpCon, and that's where you're going to be working." And I looked at it. It was a big, humongous Quonset hut. Looked like it could be a plane hangar or something, but it had operations and things and different offices and such in there. And I would be on the second floor, I think it was, somewhere over on the side. I said, "Well, tell me this, what are the scopes like?" He said, "Scopes?" I said, "Yeah, weapons controller, isn't that what I'm doing?" He said, "Nobody's told you what your duties are going to be here." I said, "No, I figured it was going to be the same as it was at Tyndall, that I was going to be guiding pilots somewhere on a radar scope." He said, "No." He said, "This job is as far away from radar scopes as you can get." He said, "Your training in that is just null and void here." So I was puzzled about that. What was I doing here then? I said, "Well, I never liked doing that, so I guess anything's going to be better." He said, "You'll enjoy this job. It's a good one." So he took me around, drove around the base, showed me different places. He said, "I'll take you to the BOQ now." And we stopped in front of the BOQ, and he said, "We'll get you set up here, and then you can get some rest, and I'll pick you up first thing in the morning. We go to headquarters and get your paperwork done. And then I'll take you in and introduce you to the fellows at work." So I agreed to that. We walked into the BOQ, and the guy that was sitting there was reading a Playboy, and he kind of looked up and did a double take, dropped his Playboy, and his feet came off the table, and he kind of leaned in and said, "Marshall?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "You got a twin brother?" Marshall said, "No, this is your new guy. His name," and I stood up straight and I said, "Alfred Croucher, second lieutenant." And he said, Alfred, there's no need to yell it out. We're kind of easy going here. You don't have to be so military. And I said, oh, okay. He said, Croucher, huh? I said, yeah. I said, you can call me Rick, though. I answered to Rick, not Alfred. He said, yeah, why is that? And I said, well, my mother wanted to call me Rick because she thought that was a good football player's name. He said, yeah, you play football? I said, no. He looked at me funny. I said, that's what she wanted to call me. She didn't want me to be called Alfie. And he said, oh, and looked at me funny. He said, well, you don't play football then? I said, no, I tried that once and I was terrible at it, so no, I don't play football. And Marshall, who was, what did they call them? Anyway, it was the commander of the base had, when a new recruit came in, had somebody on the base show him around. I can't remember what's the name he called himself. Said he was, I don't know. Anyway, a sponsor. That's what it was. He was my sponsor to get me familiarized with the base and everything, and familiarized with the duties that I was going to be handling. And he said, my sponsor did, he said, okay, I'm gonna leave you in his hands now, and I'll be back here at 7. Don't forget, set your alarm. I said, well, what time is it? He said, it's midnight. I said, midnight? It's blue sky out there. He said, yeah, that's the way it is. You're above the Arctic Circle here, you know. And that sun out there at about 2, it's going to dip just below the horizon and pop back up at 4 during the summer months. I said, how do you sleep? He said, we'll explain all that to you. Don't worry about it. You just need to go to your room and get some rest, because I can see you're exhausted. Well, I'm having trouble keeping this thing lit again. I said, yeah, okay. And as he started toward the door, he said, scopes. And he laughed and laughed. I just kind of looked at him funny, because obviously I wasn't going to be working on a radar scope, but I had no clue what I was going to be doing. So he went home. He was living off base, so it looked like my bride could come up, and I got in touch with her about that during the week. Well, I went to my room, and it was a dingy little room, painted gray, linoleum floors over concrete, thin little blanket at the bottom of the bed, dingy yellowing curtains that I pulled as tight as I could. Still didn't block out that sun. And I put my shaving cream and razor and toothpaste and toothbrush in the bathroom. Got undressed and slipped into bed thinking I'll never get to sleep in this sunlight, because it was bright. Got under the covers, pulled that thin blanket up over me, put my head on the pillow, and I was out like a light. My first day in Iceland. My sponsor who looked, that I looked, we both looked like each other so much. It was just, I couldn't believe it. We still laugh about that when we get in touch, which isn't very often. He's a guy that loves to travel. He and his wife have been everywhere in the world, I think. One of the nicest guys you'd ever meet. He was more help to me during that time in Iceland than anybody else. When my wife came up, he said we could stay with them, he and his wife, until we found a place off base, which we did. And that was an enjoyable time too. I reckon the paperwork and everything took about a month before she could get up there, but I stayed in the BOQ until she got up there, and then we went out and stayed with he and his wife until we found a place pretty near to them. It was a couple of streets over with a nice Icelandic family. We lived on the bottom floor and they lived on the top floor. It was a lot of fun. We enjoyed it. That's my veterans experience. First day in Iceland back in June of 1969. What a surprise. Well, it's been a little rainy here, not the kind of rain that is heavy and hard on the lawn, but a nice quiet rain that you can just hear it, and it's not a flooding rain, which is so nice. It's the flooding that always disturbs me. I love the rain. Excuse me, I just don't like the effects of the rain. Happy Veterans Day to all you veterans out there. It was quite some time ago. But looking back, it was more enjoyable than I remember it being at the time. Because at the time, all I wanted was out. There were so many of us that wanted out. But that was probably the best time in the military that I had. Iceland was a thoroughly enjoyable experience. And being with him and his wife was one of the best times that my bride and I had. So I look back on those days with a smile on my face. Take care of yourselves, everybody. God bless you. Till the next time. Bye-bye.